Cause in the beginning it was hard, but I never let it get to me.
Look him in the face and tell him you can do what the fuck you want.
Yeah.
I'm Nina Riley, entertainment lawyer and civil rights attorney from Los Angeles, California. Some of you may know one of my clients, Eric Young, or as he's known as an artist and performer, Trigga Treg. Maybe you've heard his latest project, American Me. If you haven't, I suggest that you do get it, only because that will really let you know what type of man we're talking about here. More than anything else really will. But I'm not here to sell records. He can do that without me. I'm here because Mr. Young has been embroiled in the fight of his life against the ongoing Cecil County shenanigans that have him stuck in jail right now, where quite frankly he does not belong. Some of you may know him because he's your neighbor, your friend, your family. Maybe you see him around town, or like I said, you know his music. But some of you only know him because of what you've been reading about him in the Cecil Whig. The Cecil Whig, a newspaper supposed to be reporting the facts. The Cecil Whig, more like a toilet paper. That paper is about to find itself a defendant in a lawsuit brought by this firm on behalf of Mr. Young for the defamatory and libelous statements that they have published about my client. The latest of which has to do with the circus held recently here in the Cecil County Circuit Court, which they're daring to call a jury trial. More like a joke trial, if you ask me. Answer me this, public. How can you have a jury trial where in the jury pool we have about 60 people in a small town of Cecil County where everyone knows everyone's business, that we have a 60-person jury pool where not one person knows each other? Answer me this, public. In that same jury pool, how is it possible that we have 2 federal FBI agents? One is bad enough, but let's be honest. 2? I just don't see that could be a coincidence. To me, that smacks of jury tampering, jury intimidation, witness intimidation, even attorney or judge intimidation. 2 FBI agents in a jury pool? I've literally never heard of anything like that in my career. Not in real life, at least. Maybe out here in Hollywood in La La Land in a movie script, but not in real life. No. That means that was no accident. That didn't happen by chance. Now, this latest story in the Cecil toilet paper is painting Mr. Young as a violent aggressor who, quote, slammed someone's head against a metal transformer box and caused $10,000 in medical bills. Check the trial transcripts, public. You'll find no such testimony from anyone, not even the alleged victim. And let's talk for just a moment about this alleged victim. This is a man who the Cecil Whig wants to point as a feeble, helpless little old man who goes to church on Sundays and found it in his weak, feeble heart to forgive Eric for assaulting him. You want to know what really happened? This victim, who by the way owns a tree removal service, not for the weak and feeble, that's for sure. I mean, the guy's got arms like a tree trunk and a torso to match. This guy threw a tree at Mr. Young's car because he thought Mr. Young was driving too fast. Now, Mr. Young stopped the car and got out, checked the damage on his car to get this guy's insurance information, whatever anyone would do, and a big fight breaks out. They start screaming and yelling at each other, and poor feeble victim, Mr. Christian, Mr. I forgive you, calls Eric Young the N-word, calls my client boy repeatedly, tries to make Mr. Young think that Mr. Young doesn't have the right to be on that street or in that neighborhood because he's a boy or an N-word. Go ahead, tell me I'm pulling the race card. Tell me that I'm making everything about race. What I'm doing is telling you the truth of what really happened. And I'm telling you what you should know. I'm telling you that if you get those trial transcripts, If you listen to what was said and what was permitted to be said in that open court by all those lawyers, by that judge, by the bailiff, by the clerk, was that Mr. Christianity kept calling Mr. Young boy in that open courtroom in front of those jurors. And no one ever stopped them. No one ever said, you know, it's 2018, slavery is abolished, we don't really talk like that anymore. No, no one. Then answer me this, public. How is it that the only witness that Cecil County brings is the most well-known drug dealer on the street? Maybe even in the neighborhood. Probably in the whole town. Why is he our expert? Don't you think that the prosecution came to him in a way where if he didn't testify, that maybe he would face some kind of drug charge? You don't think that's possible? Answer me this, public. How about the victim's wife? A poor, suffering woman full of tears because she thought her husband was going to die. If she's so sensitive to people dying, I wonder how she was able to overdose her own 2 kids so that they actually died. Why are these the people that the state parades around at that circus and try to call that a trial? I'll tell you why. Because they don't have any other honest or legitimate witnesses. That's why. And you know, I saw those medical records, those x-rays, etc., but I never saw any proof, not a tidbit whatsoever, that they came from that fight. And let's talk about that fight. Have any of you ever come so close to death that you knew it was over? Have any of you been so strangled where you can't breathe, you can't fight back, you can't control your arms, you can't control your legs, so strangled that you lose consciousness? And you can just barely feel it coming on. And you know what happens to you then? One of 2 things. Either you die, or you bring that last fight out of you. And you do whatever it takes to protect your life, to get out of that chokehold. And that's what really happened, public. Mr. Christianity, Mr. Thou Shalt Not Kill, had Mr. Young in a deathly chokehold. He had those tree trunk arms around Eric's neck so that Eric not only came close to blacking out, he literally lost consciousness. And he had him in there so tight that Eric couldn't fight back. He couldn't even bring out that last will to fight. The only reason that Eric Young survived was that a neighbor came out of the house and intervened and screamed at Mr. Thou Shalt Not Kill, "Stop it, stop it, you're choking him, you're killing him." I guess that did something. Mr. I forgive you let up, maybe just a tiny bit, enough where Eric could escape, where he got a breath. And yes, he took that breath and he finally fought back. Wouldn't you? And doesn't the Constitution of the United States of America give us the right to defend ourselves against bodily harm? They give us the right to defend ourselves with a gun if our life is threatened. Don't tell me you can't defend yourself with your bare hands. That's all Mr. Young did. Come back from the brink of death and defend himself with his bare hands. And as for this business about a metal transformer box, that's nowhere in the trial transcripts anywhere. That's something the state's attorney, Mr. Trossel, brought up at the sentencing hearing, which they had after the all-white jury, the FBI tainted jury. After that jury found Eric Young guilty of a misdemeanor, second-degree assault. Answer me this, public. How is it that the witnesses in this circus, the alleged victims, got off with nothing? No attempted murder charge, no second-degree assault charge, no hate crime charge, no perjury charge, nothing. And then they're brought into a sentencing hearing, paraded in, and allowed to bring in statements along with that prosecuting attorney Trossel. They're allowed to come in and allege new facts, make statements that were never uttered during trial, and basically put my client on trial again? At least we did get a chance to put Mr. Young in front of the judge, where Mr. Young got to once again explain what that felt like as a grown man, to be called boy, to be called N-word, to have trees hurled at his car while he's driving to his own home in his own neighborhood. Mr. Young got to turn around and face that man built like a tree and tell that man face to face, man to man, maybe Young shouldn't have stopped that car. Maybe they shouldn't have had words. That he wishes they never did fight. That they're neighbors and they see each other every day. And that Mr. Young never had any bad feelings against him, except that day when he was almost strangled to death. My client, Mr. Young, still had the grace and composure, the humility to address this racist, liar, and attempted murderer. That he could do it with any modicum of respect is beyond me. But what he did, the level of respect and restraint, the level of humanity that Mr. Young did express that day, he turned around and apologized. He offered to pay those unproven medical expenses, even though he knows full well they have nothing to do with anything that happened on that day. And what happened? The judge may not have given him what those greedy state's attorneys were asking for. Can you believe they had the audacity to ask for 3 to 8 years to the judge with a straight face? Even though the judge sentenced him to 1 year, that 1 year is absurd. For self-defense? I've never heard anything like that before either. This is an atrocity, a miscarriage of justice. Or how about the ridiculous offer of another one of the state's attorney to build a recording studio in the jail? As if that erases all of the trumped up overcharges. As if that erases the support of a corrupt police system. As if that replaces the inhumane jail. Not to mention, they want to put a recording studio in an institution that doesn't even have an adequate law library. And here's the Cecil Wig, defaming this man's reputation and reporting things that never happened at trial as if they did. Painting Mr. Young as a violent criminal with a sordid past, mentioning his 22 horrible criminal motor violations. I'll give you some of those. Number 1, failing to merge at an appropriate speed. How about this? Failure to stop for long enough during appropriate weather conditions. Those are not criminal charges. I pose they're not even real charges. Let's be clear, public. Mr. Young has had charges brought against him in the past. Mr. Young served time on those charges, but those charges were for drugs. Never anything violent. Not assault first, not assault second, nothing. And by the way, no one ever bothered to report that his biggest charge was eventually thrown out because the drug lab was found guilty of mismanaging evidence, tampering evidence, removing drugs. The entire case had to be thrown out, and that he had to be released from state custody. And he had to be released so quickly that he couldn't even stand on that state jail property any longer. You know why? Because that state knew, and they were so scared of a lawsuit by him. So then what did they do? They replaced that jail sentence, that prison sentence, with a $100 fine. And then they suspended that $100 fine. That means they knew how full of lies and tricks they were, and they knew that they were at risk of being sued. Just like the Cecil Wig better know that it's at risk of being sued. And if I don't see a formal letter of correction and an apology in that paper within the next 48 hours, we're filing that suit, and we're going to win. Not only because it's right, but we're not going to file that suit here in Cecil County where it's biased and judgmental. We're taking that case to the next level. And for those of you that are at all interested in learning the actual facts about this case, go ahead and call my office. I'll help you see the facts of what really happened. In the meantime, be careful what you believe as it pertains to the Cecil County Wig, and certainly as it pertains to my client, Mr. Young. You'll see that this is a man who has the gentlest soul and biggest heart of all Cecil County. A man who can still hold his head high even after all the wrongs he's suffered. Well, those days are over. I'm here to set the record straight and make things right. I hope we have your support. Write into the paper. Let them know what you think about being lied to, about being manipulated by. And if we don't have your support, I better have your attention, because this is not going away. And this is not going to be the last you've heard of me, or the last that you've seen of me. Not until this county gets it together and realizes we live in a free society, and one where racism and lies do not dominate our lives or our justice system. No, I'm here to make things right. And we're going to start with the Cecil wig, the toilet paper, and we're going to continue with the Cecil County State's Attorney's Office, the Cecil County Police Department, and then we're coming for that Cecil County Detention Center. You'll find me right here next week, letting you know exactly what I found about this case. That's a whole nother world that's going to be exposed. Just you watch. And for those of you that are here right now making your judgments about this man based on what you're reading in that toilet paper, go ahead, get with the program. You deserve more than that. Quit letting that trash paper feed you lies and mistruths. Demand better, just like we are. And if you really care so much, go ahead and get his album. I dare you. Find out what kind of man you really have living here in Cecil County. Find out what a real American sounds like, what a real American looks like. I guarantee you'll be on our side, the side of truth, because truth always wins over evil, and that's straight from the good book.
Looks good at the top. Game's over, the pain's over, the change came like the sun when the rain's over. Yeah, this a blessing manifested. I think it dawned on me last time I got arrested. The grace that poured on me, I ain't even have to question. Yeah, mama, I finally learned my lesson. She said I was a winner since I was a beginner. So now I wanna see more of the polarized Dior. Crowd goes wild every time they hear me score. Better than the regular, still determined to be more.
Like a champion. They said that it was over and it can't be done. They thought it was a fight, but we already won.